Some moments don't announce themselves as life-changing. They arrive quietly, like a closed office door that should have been open, or the sound of someone breathing just a little too slowly on the other side. Before that night, I never once imagined my boss would look at me with trembling eyes and say, "Can you stay after work? I don't want to be alone right now." But that's exactly how it began. My name is Daniel Hayes, and I'm 29 years old. If you'd asked me a year ago what defined me, I would have listed simple things: my small rented studio apartment, a desk in the corner of the ninth floor at Hart& Morrow Consulting, and the comfortable rhythm of quiet days spent behind a screen. Life wasn't exciting, but it made sense. You wake up, walk to the bus stop, nod politely to the same strangers, take the elevator to your floor, type reports, reply to emails, eat lunch alone, finish tasks, go home, sleep, repeat. People sometimes talk about routine like it's a prison, but for me, routine was a cushion, a gentle one that kept my loneliness from spilling everywhere. I never meant to stay at that job forever. After college, I had big ideas: travel, photography, maybe starting a small business. But life, bills, and mild disappointments have a way of turning "for now" into "for years." Before I knew it, I'd been there 3 full trips around the sun, filing reports for people who barely remembered my name. Most days, I didn't mind being invisible. I convinced myself it hurt less that way. The only person who ever made my heartbeat shift, even slightly, was my boss, Amelia Hart. Early 30s, sharp mind, immaculate presentation. A voice that could cut glass in meetings but soften unexpectedly when thanking someone. She wasn't the type people forgot, not because she demanded attention, but because she carried herself with a calm determination that made others stand straighter around her. Sometimes I'd hear colleagues whisper things like, "She'll be CEO someday," or "I wish I had her confidence." And maybe this sounds strange, maybe even a little sad, but I never thought of her as my crush or my fantasy. Admiration fit more comfortably, safer too. She was above my reach, and I was okay with that. The rumors about her engagement floated around the office long before I ever saw the ring. Her fiancé was some financial consultant from another firm, a man with a good reputation, a good family, a good future. The kind of life you imagine when you picture crisp shirts, champagne glasses, and travel photos tagged at luxury resorts. Colleagues speculated, of course. "She's glowing. Must be the engagement. I bet the wedding will be next spring. Her fiancé is lucky. She's something else." I stayed out of that chatter. I was the quiet background presence, the person who held doors, remembered birthdays, fixed printers, and listened more than I spoke. If life was a movie, I wasn't the main character. I was the person adjusting the lighting just right so the main character could shine. And still, somehow, I never expected that night. It was a Thursday, the kind of Thursday that felt older than the entire week that came before it. Morning rain had turned the sidewalks glossy, and by afternoon the clouds parted, leaving the city wrapped in a golden warmth that made windows reflect light like tiny mirrors. Inside the office, everything was quiet, too quiet, the way it gets when deadlines have passed and the leftover tension lingers like steam after a shower. Most of the team had left early. I stayed behind to finalize a financial summary, spreadsheets, numbers, columns that only made sense if you stared long enough. Around 8:20 p.m., I realized I was the last person on my floor, or so I thought. I stretched my back, rolled my shoulders, and reached for my phone to check the time when I noticed Amelia's office light still glowing behind frosted glass. That wasn't unusual. She often worked late, dedicated, driven, tireless. But something felt different, not dramatic, not obvious, just different. The light wasn't sharp like usual. It was dimmer, like someone had turned the brightness down but left the emotion up. The blinds were half closed, and I saw the silhouette of someone sitting perfectly still at her desk. Her posture, usually upright, confident, seemed collapsed inward, as if her spine was holding more weight than her body could carry. I hesitated at the hallway intersection, debating with myself. Do I check on her? Is that crossing a boundary? Will she think I'm nosy? Before I could decide, I heard a soft sound, not quite a sob, but not breathing either. A kind of fragile exhale that carried pain, like someone was letting out air they'd been holding for hours. My chest tightened. I didn't know her deeply, but in that moment I knew enough. I knocked gently, just once. "Ms. Hart?" My voice cracked slightly. No answer. A full second passed. Two. Then, barely above a whisper, "Daniel?" I opened the door just a few inches, not wanting to intrude. Amelia sat at her desk, still in her blazer, but her hair slightly out of place like she'd run her hands through it 100 times. Papers lay scattered. Not messy, just uncharacteristically disordered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression wasn't defeated. It was more like she was stunned, frozen between disbelief and acceptance. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said softly. "I was just heading out and wanted to make sure you were okay." She looked up at me, really looked, like she was trying to recognize the world again through someone else's eyes. And then she spoke, not in her usual decisive tone, but in a voice that had been holding too much for too long. "I canceled my engagement today." There was no dramatic pause, no trembling gasp, just those 5 quiet words dropped between us like fragile glass. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say the wrong thing, and I didn't want to offer cliches like "I'm sorry" or "you'll be okay," because sometimes words like that feel like dust blowing over an open wound. So I just nodded gently and said, "That must be a lot." Her lips curved, not in a smile, but in a small expression of gratitude. "A lot," she repeated. Then her eyes drifted to the corner of her desk where her engagement ring lay alone, glittering against a stack of documents as if it didn't understand it was no longer wanted. The silence between us didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt real, weighted, human. I noticed her hand tremble just slightly as she closed a folder. Not dramatically, just enough to betray how much she was holding together. I took a small step forward. "I can stay for a bit if you'd like company." She looked at me, and for a second her vulnerability cracked through the surface. "Daniel," she whispered, voice low, "can you stay after work? I don't want to be alone right now." I didn't think. I didn't analyze. I didn't wonder what it meant. I just nodded once. "Of course." She stood up slowly, her chair scraping softly against the floor, and for the first time since I'd known her, Amelia looked small, not in presence, but in the space she seemed to be shrinking away from. "Let's sit somewhere not so formal," she murmured. So we walked, side by side, down the empty hallway toward the break room, our footsteps echoing gently in a space that once felt cold but now felt oddly warm. As we walked, I noticed tiny things, the slight wobble in her breath, the way she held her elbow with her other hand for comfort, how her steps were steady but her eyes were distant. People imagine emotional collapse as dramatic, but sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a woman who always stands tall, letting her shoulders drop just an inch. I pushed open the break room door, letting her enter first. The vending machines buzzed softly, the city's reflection hovered in the window, and a forgotten mug sat in the sink like an unfinished conversation. Amelia sat at the small round table near the window, clasping her hands together. I sat across from her, not too close, not too far, giving her space to breathe. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence didn't feel empty, it felt shared. Then she inhaled slowly and said, almost to herself, "I thought I knew my future." I didn't interrupt. I let the silence invite more. Her voice tightened, not loud but edged with honesty. "Turns out, I barely knew my present." And as the office lights hummed above us and the city outside glowed with people who would never know our names, I realized this wasn't just a moment of comfort. It was the beginning of something neither of us understood yet, something that would change the rhythm of my quiet life forever. The hum of the vending machine filled the room like a soft, mechanical sigh. Outside the window, the city looked almost gentle. Blurred lights, distant traffic, shapes moving behind glass far away. Inside, it was just us, me, my boss, and the quiet truth hanging in the air. I canceled my engagement today. She hadn't repeated it, but the words were still there, heavy and present, sitting between us like a third person at the table. Amelia stared at her hands for a long moment, fingers interlocked so tightly I could see the faint whiteness in her knuckles. She always looked in control during meetings, but here, under this softer light, she looked human, breakable, tired. "Do you drink coffee this late?" she asked suddenly, voice small but steady. "Sometimes," I replied, "when I'm pretending I don't need sleep." A corner of her mouth twitched. "I guess tonight is one of those nights for me." I stood up, grateful for something to do. "Let me make you one, or tea if you'd rather." "Coffee's fine," she said. "Black is okay." The old machine in the corner groaned awake as I pressed the buttons. I watched the paper cup fill slowly, the steam rising like something out of a quiet ritual. It smelled burnt and cheap, the way all office coffee does. But somehow in that moment it felt like the most important drink I'd ever poured. I placed the cup in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it, not to drink yet, but for the warmth. "Thank you, Daniel," she murmured. I sat back down. I didn't ask questions. I just waited. It's funny how rarely we just wait for someone. Most of the time, we jump in with advice or stories of our own, trying to fix what can't be fixed in a single sentence. She took a breath. "You probably heard about my engagement," she said finally. "I'd heard," I admitted. "Just office talk, nothing detailed." Her eyes flickered up to mine. "Office talk. Right." There was no anger in her voice, only a tired kind of understanding, like she'd already accepted that her life would always be something people discussed over microwaved leftovers. "I thought we were okay," she continued. "We had our differences like anyone else, but I thought we were building a life, a plan, a future that at least made sense on paper." She laughed once, but it was hollow. And then she stared at the coffee for a heartbeat, then lifted her gaze. "And then I found out that the person I was about to marry didn't really choose me. Not fully, not honestly, not when it mattered." I stayed quiet, letting the words land. She swallowed. "It wasn't just cheating," she added softly. "If it was only that, I don't know, I'd almost understand it in a twisted way. People are weak sometimes. They make dumb, selfish mistakes." Her fingers tightened again around the cup. "But he was planning a different future behind my back, a version of life where I was optional." That word hurt more than any accusation. Optional. I felt something tug in my chest. I knew that feeling, not from an engagement, but from watching people pick others over me again and again in smaller ways. Friend groups, invitations, plans. Not chosen, not always, not first. "I heard him on the phone," Amelia said. "He was talking about my schedule, my long hours, my responsibility at the firm. And he laughed and said, 'If it doesn't work out with her, at least I'll still be in the right circles.'" She paused. "He didn't even say my name." There was a stillness after that, a heavy one, like the room itself was holding its breath for her. "I think that was the moment I knew," she whispered. "Not when I saw the messages, not when I found out about her." She shook her head. "It was when I realized I was a position, a strategic move, not a person." I felt anger rise in me, not sharp and loud, but slow and hot, the kind that settles in your stomach and burns quietly. "I'm sorry," I said, and this time the words felt different. Not like a cliché, but like the only true thing I could give. She gave me a small, sad smile. "You know what's strange?" she asked. "I can give presentations to rooms full of executives. I can negotiate contracts. I can cut projects that don't perform. But walking away from someone I thought I'd spend my life with? Her voice wavered slightly. That felt like jumping off a cliff. We sat with that image for a second. Her standing at the edge of a familiar life, choosing emptiness over a lie. Why today? I asked quietly. What made this the day? She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that question from herself more than from me. Because today I realized that if I went through with it, I'd be spending the rest of my life apologizing to myself, explaining to my reflection why I stayed, and I'm already tired of explaining myself to everyone else. She looked up again. I didn't want to become someone I couldn't respect. I took a slow breath. That sounds brave, I said. She almost laughed at that, but her eyes stayed wet. Is that what this looks like to you? Brave? Yeah, I said. To me it does. She studied my face for a second like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. And you? She asked suddenly. Have you ever walked away from something that hurt, but you knew you had to? I hesitated. For a long time, my past was something I kept boxed up, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt small compared to other people's tragedies. But sitting there with her in that quiet room with stale coffee and humming lights, I realized small pain still hurts. Yes, I said softly. Not like this, not an engagement, but yeah. She tipped her head slightly. What happened? I gave a small, self-conscious smile, looking at the table for a moment before meeting her eyes again. I was with someone for 3 years, I began. We met at my first job. It wasn't glamorous, we weren't rich, but we had this idea that we'd build up together, save a bit, maybe move out of the city, maybe start something. She used to say we were a team. My throat tightened for a second as old memories surfaced, not sharp anymore, but still carrying weight. Then she got a better job, I continued. New office, new people, new world. I was happy for her. Or I tried to be. But slowly the we became I. Her texts got shorter. Her calls got less frequent. Plans were always maybe, and I'll let you know. Amelia watched me quietly, not interrupting. One day, I said, she told me she needed room to grow. She said she still cared about me, but she didn't see me in the life she was building anymore. I gave a faint, humorless smile. Basically, she outgrew me. That's not fair, Amelia said softly. It was honest, I replied, and it hurt like hell. But looking back, I'm glad she said it, because staying with someone who sees you as something that doesn't fit their future anymore? I shook my head. That would have crushed me in a different way. The silence that followed didn't feel awkward. It felt shared, like two people sitting on different edges of similar cliffs. Amelia's eyes were softer now, less distant. Did you feel lonely after? She asked. Yeah, I admitted. Very, but I was already lonely before. I just didn't realize how much until she was gone. She nodded slowly. That's the worst part, she said, realizing you've been lonely next to someone. Her words hit deeper than I expected. We sat there for a while, sipping terrible coffee like it was something sacred. The break room's fluorescent light softened with the late hour, turning everything slightly warmer like the scene was being filmed in slow motion. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Do you ever feel like you've disappeared into your own life? She asked. Like the days are full, but you're not really there? I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. All the time, I said. I think that's why I don't mind staying late sometimes. It feels like the only time the world goes quiet enough for me to hear myself think. She gave me a long look, the kind that made me feel oddly seen. That's how I feel now, she admitted. The wedding was supposed to give my life shape, a timeline, a story people could understand. Now that it's gone. She glanced around the small room. It's just me and my work, and tonight that felt too empty. I nodded. Is that why you asked me to stay? I asked gently. Her answer was immediate. Yes, she said. Then she hesitated. Well, not just that. My heart skipped. She looked almost embarrassed, which was strange to see on her usually composed face. You're quiet, she said, but not in a way that makes me feel like I'm talking to a wall. You listen. You don't rush to fill the space. I realized today that I didn't want to go home and sit in my apartment replaying everything alone. I needed someone who could just be there without turning it into a performance. She dropped her gaze briefly. I thought of you. I didn't know what to do with that sentence. It felt like someone had turned on a light in a hallway I didn't know was in me. I'm glad you did, I replied softly. She sighed, a deep, shaky exhale. Part of me feels guilty for dragging you into my mess, she said. You're my employee. I'm your boss. This isn't exactly standard HR practice. I gave a small smile. Well, I said, as long as you don't make me fill out a comforting your boss after a breakup form, I think we're okay. She actually laughed then, a real unguarded laugh that filled the room and loosened something in my chest. Maybe I'll create that form, she teased. You'd get an exceeds expectations rating. I shrugged. I've always wanted to be good at something. She gave me a look that said, You're better than you think, but she didn't say it out loud. Outside, a car passed, its headlights streaking briefly against the window. The city had fully given in tonight now, the sky dark and reflective. Inside, we lingered somewhere between colleagues and something else. Not lovers, not yet, not even close. Just two people who had accidentally placed their quiet hurts on the same table. After a while, I checked the time on my phone. It's late, I said gently. Do you want me to call you a cab? She hesitated, then shook her head. I drove, she said, but I don't really want to drive alone right now. I nodded slowly. I can walk you to your car, I offered. Make sure you get there okay. She stood up, smoothing her blazer even though there was no one left to impress. I'd like that, she said softly. We walked, back through the empty corridor. At this hour, the office felt like a ghost of itself. All the noise and chaos of daytime replaced by the sound of our footsteps and the low buzz of electronics in sleep mode. As we passed my desk, I reached for my bag. Thank you for staying, she said. Anytime, I replied. And I meant it more than she knew. We took the elevator down together. No small talk, just the gentle ding of each floor sliding past, the quiet whir of machinery. At the ground floor, the doors opened to a mostly empty lobby. The security guard glanced up, nodded in recognition, then went back to his screen. We stepped out into the cool night air. The rain from earlier had left the pavement dark and reflective, mirroring the streetlights in long, shimmering lines. Her car was parked beneath one of those lights. For a moment, we just stood there beside it, the city's low sounds swirling around us, distant honks, a bus braking, someone laughing far away. Will you be okay? I asked finally. She nodded, but her eyes glistened again. I will, she said. Not tonight, but soon. I swallowed. If you ever need someone to talk to, I said, I'm around, even if it's just about spreadsheets and coffee machines. That earned another soft laugh. Thank you, Daniel, she said. Really? She unlocked the car but didn't get in yet. Can I ask you one more thing? She said. Sure. She looked at me with that same fragile honesty from upstairs. Do I look as broken as I feel? The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't know the answer, but because it was so raw. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. You look like someone who made a hard choice and is still standing. Her chin trembled just slightly. That's something, I guess, she whispered. It's everything, I replied. She studied my face for another moment, then gave a tiny nod, like she was storing those words somewhere quiet inside her. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Amelia. She got into the car, started the engine, and pulled away, the red taillights shrinking into the dark. I stood there for a few more seconds, feeling the emptiness rush back into the space where she'd just been. Then I turned and walked toward the bus stop, the city air cool against my face. I had no idea that this was only the beginning, that tonight's small choice, staying after work because she didn't want to be alone, would be the first thread in a story that would tangle both our lives together in ways neither of us had planned. But at that moment, all I knew was this. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. Someone had looked for me in their loneliness, and somehow that felt important. If you'd asked me the next morning whether anything had really changed, I probably would have said no. The office looked the same. The elevator chimed the same way. The coffee still tasted like burnt cardboard. But something was different anyway. Or maybe it was just me. I noticed things I'd never really paid attention to before, like the way people fell quiet whenever Amelia walked past, or how their eyes flicked to her left hand out of habit, as if checking the status of her future like a stock price. Only now her ring finger was bare, and that absence was louder than any piece of jewelry. I tried not to stare. I succeeded, most of the time. Around mid-morning, as I was reviewing a stack of quarterly reports, I felt a soft presence near my desk. I looked up and almost jumped. Amelia stood there. No entourage, no folder, no formal reason to be in my section. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hi," I answered, sitting up a little straighter without meaning to. "Good. Morning." Her eyes held mine for a second, as if she was checking to see if last night had been real or if we were both going to pretend it never happened. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Yeah, sure." She gestured toward one of the small windows at the end of the aisle. "Walk with me." I nodded and followed her. The walk was short, but my heart made it feel longer. We stopped near the window overlooking the street where people looked like tiny figures moving between lines of traffic and reflections. "First," she said, turning to me, "thank you for last night." "You don't have to thank me," I replied. "I didn't do anything special. I just stayed." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes that is special," she said. There was a pause. She glanced down at the reports in my hand. "Are those the Hartley accounts?" she asked. "Yeah, I was just checking trend patterns before finalizing." She nodded once. "You're good with that. Details. Patterns. You see things others don't mention." I felt my face warm a little. Compliments weren't exactly common in my world. "Thank you," I said. She drew in a breath like she was about to step into cold water. "I wanted to say something else," she added, "about last night." Her gaze drifted to the glass, then back to me. "Everything I told you, I don't usually share that with people, especially not people from work." "I figured," I said softly. "But I'm glad I did," she admitted. "It felt easier to breathe afterward." I gave a small nod. "I'm glad you trusted me," I said. "And it doesn't leave that room. You know that." "I know," she said. "That's why I felt safe saying it." We stood there for a moment, shoulder to shoulder but not touching. Just two people sharing the same patch of quiet in a crowded building. Before either of us could say anything more, footsteps approached from behind. "Amelia, there you are," someone called. It was Jordan, one of the senior partners, carrying a tablet and wearing a slightly forced smile. His eyes flicked from her to me, then back again, just long enough for judgment to be implied but not spoken. "Need you for a quick review on the Myers pitch," he said. "Meeting room 3? "I'll be right there," she replied smoothly, the professional mask sliding back over her features with practiced ease. He nodded, gave me a brief, polite smile lacking any real warmth, and walked away. For a second, Amelia's shoulders sagged just slightly, the difference between Amelia the boss and Amelia the person. "Duty calls," she murmured. "I should finish these," I said, lifting the reports a little. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Lunch," she said. "Do you have plans?" Just me and a sad sandwich at my desk, I replied. The corner of her mouth lifted. Don't eat the sad sandwich today, she said. Come to my office at E1. We'll order something slightly less tragic. I blinked. Okay, I said. Yeah, sure. She gave a small nod and walked away, her heels clicking softly against the floor. As I watched her go, one thought drifted through my mind, half warning, half wonder. This is how lines start to blur. At 1:02 p.m., I knocked gently on her office door. Come in, she called. She'd taken off her blazer, draping it over the back of her chair. Her sleeves were rolled up slightly, revealing a thin bracelet on her wrist I'd never noticed before. On the coffee table near the window, 2 takeaway containers waited, still neatly closed. You're right on time, she said. Very on brand. Traffic between my desk and your office was light, I joked, walking in. She smiled and gestured to the seat opposite her. I hope you like pasta, she said. I ordered at random from the place downstairs. I like most things that don't come from the vending machine, I replied. We ate in quiet at first, not awkward, just gentle. The sound of plastic forks against cardboard, the muted hum of the city outside, her computer screen dimmed in the background like it was giving us privacy. You know they're talking, right? She said suddenly. I looked up. Who? She gave me a look that made the question unnecessary. People, she said. Our people, this floor, the office. They see things, they speculate, they build stories. I hesitated. I guessed, I admitted. I've seen a few glances, heard a couple of half sentences when I walk past. And, she asked calmly, does it bother you? I thought about it. A little, I said honestly. Not because of what they think, but because I don't want it to cause trouble for you. Her eyes softened. That's what you're worried about? Mostly, yeah. She watched me for a moment, then shook her head with a small, almost fond disbelief. You're different, Daniel, she said. Is that good? I asked. A smile ghosted across her lips. It's rare, she replied. So yes, it's good. We ate a bit more. She pushed pieces of pasta around with her fork, not really focused on the food. Here's the question, I said after a minute. Does it bother you, what they're saying? She leaned back slightly, considering. It annoys me, she said. Not because they're wrong to notice we've been talking more, but because they act like I don't get to be a person outside my title, as if needing someone to talk to makes me weak. It doesn't, I said immediately. I know that, she replied. I just sometimes forget. Our eyes met across the table. There was something fragile in the air, something that could easily be broken by the wrong word. I don't think there's anything wrong with you needing anyone, I said. Friend, colleague, human, whatever you want to call it. She exhaled slowly like she'd been holding that thought inside. Can we call it that? She asked. Being human. I gave a faint smile. We can. She nodded once. I like that, she said. Over the next couple of weeks, little things began to change. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would show up in a report, just tiny shifts in the gravitational pull of my days. She started stopping by my desk more often, sometimes with a question about a spreadsheet, sometimes to ask if I'd seen a particular email, and sometimes, frankly, for no real reason at all. Do you have the latest numbers for the Rowley account? Yes, just emailed them. Good. Also, have you ever tried the new coffee place 2 blocks down? I'm thinking of defecting from our machine. Or, got a minute to look over something? Sure. It's not work-related. I'm trying to decide whether to cancel the honeymoon booking or postpone it, and they sent this ridiculous list of fees. She would catch herself then and offer a small apology. Sorry, that's not your job. It's fine, I'd say. I'm good at reading fine print. We'd stand side by side at her desk, reviewing refund policies and cancellation clauses, turning an almost wedding into a shared administrative task that somehow felt more intimate than it sounded. The office noticed. You can tell by the way conversations pause when you walk in, by the swift, polite smiles that don't quite reach the eyes, by the way people say good morning with a question mark at the end. One afternoon, as I was refilling my water bottle in the kitchen, I heard two coworkers talking behind the half wall near the fridge. Ever since the breakup, one whispered. She's been glued to him. Can you blame her? The other said. Free emotional support, no hourly rate. They laughed quietly. At least he looks harmless. Yeah, until HR gets involved. My grip tightened on the bottle. I didn't say anything, didn't confront them. But the words stuck to me like static. When I got back to my desk, Amelia appeared a few minutes later holding a file. Can you, she began, then stopped, reading my expression. What's wrong? Nothing, I said too quickly. She studied me. One thing about her, she could spot a lie faster than most people. Daniel, she said quietly, don't do that. Do what? Shrink, she replied. The word surprised me. I sighed. People are talking, I admitted. About us, about me. I just heard some of it. I don't want to be the reason you get dragged into office rumors. Her jaw tightened slightly. I'm already in office rumors, she said. I called off a wedding 2 weeks before the date. People will talk no matter what I do. I know, I said, but I don't want to make it worse. She was quiet for a moment, then stepped slightly closer, still keeping a respectful distance but narrowing the air between us. I'm not spending time with you because I'm broken and you're convenient, she said softly. You know that, right? I swallowed. I didn't say that. You're thinking it, she replied. I can see it from here. I looked away. What am I supposed to think? I asked. You're my boss. Your life is big, important, and I'm just... Don't finish that sentence, she cut in gently. You're not just anything. Her words were firm but kind. I spend time with you because when I talk to you, I don't feel like I'm giving a performance, she continued. I feel like I can stop being Amelia Hart, senior partner who has everything under control for 5 minutes, and just be someone who's trying her best not to drown. Her voice softened. And you don't try to fix me. You just listen. That matters more than you think. I felt something loosen in my chest. Okay, I said quietly. I'll try not to shrink. Good, she murmured. Because whether they understand it or not, I need this. I need you, as a person, as a friend. The word friend settled gently between us. It was both exactly right and maybe not entirely complete. A few days later, she appeared at my desk with a different kind of request. Hey, she said, do you have plans after work tonight? I looked up from my monitor. No, I said. Just the usual, home, reheated leftovers, maybe pretending I'll start a book and falling asleep instead. She smiled. Sounds thrilling. It's a packed schedule, I said. She exhaled softly, then asked, would you mind helping me with something at my place? I'm trying to clear out some old files, and honestly, I don't want to spend another evening alone with my thoughts and boxes of paperwork. I hesitated for a second, not because I didn't want to, but because every line that separated her world from mine seemed to blur a little more every time we crossed it. It's okay if that's too weird, she added quickly. I shouldn't have asked. I'll come, I said. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. Are you sure? She asked. Yeah, I nodded. If nothing else, I can judge your filing system. She smiled, really smiled, and the room felt brighter. Her apartment was on the 15th floor of a building that looked like all the others from the outside, glass, metal, neat rows of windows, but inside it felt exactly like her. Minimalist but warm, soft colors, books stacked in careful piles, a framed black and white photo of a beach at dusk on one wall, a vase of fresh flowers on the small dining table, even though no one else lived there. She kicked off her shoes just inside the door and gestured toward the living room. "Welcome to the disaster zone," she said. It wasn't a disaster. There were just several large storage boxes stacked next to the couch, some open, filled with papers, old notebooks, and folders with labeled tabs. "This is what's left of the wedding planning, plus some old work archives I should have sorted years ago," she explained. "I thought it'd be therapeutic to go through it." "Rip the bandage off?" I asked. "More like untangle it slowly," she said. "Bandages sound too clean for this." We sat cross-legged on the floor, a box between us. The first few folders were simple: old proposals, printouts, outdated contracts, easy to sort, easy to shred or save. Then we reached a box that was clearly not work. Inside were a stack of venue brochures, a notebook with guest list drafts, a printed email thread titled Honeymoon Options, and a photo of her and her ex at some charity event, smiling under string lights. She stared at the photo for a long moment. "Do you want me to put that aside?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "No," she said. I think I need to decide." She flipped the photo over as if that would make it less loud and set it gently into the shred pile. "That's something," I said. "Therapeutic," she said dryly. We kept working in silence for a bit. Every now and then she'd come across something heavier, a handwritten vow draft, a note scribbled in the margin of a printout. Each time she paused, breathed, and chose, keep or let go. After a while, I broke the silence. "Can I tell you something?" I asked. "Please," she said. "Anything that's not cancellation fees is welcome." I ran my fingers along the edge of a folder. "When I came here tonight, I was nervous," I admitted. Her eyes flicked up. "Because you thought this would be weird," she guessed. "Because it is a little weird," I corrected gently, but not in a bad way, just new, different. She nodded slowly. "I get that," she said. "It's weird for me too, letting someone into this space, my home, my mess." I smiled lightly. "Your mess is surprisingly organized," I said. "But yeah, I get it." We sorted another stack. The room was quiet, but not empty. Music played faintly from a speaker in the background, soft piano, nothing with lyrics. At one point, she leaned back against the side of the couch, stretching her legs out. "Can I ask you something else?" she said. "Sure." "When you look at all of this," she gestured vaguely to the boxes, "what do you see?" I glanced around. "Evidence," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Of what?" "That you tried," I answered. "That you believed enough in that future to plan for it. That you cared. You don't build this much detail around something if you don't care." Her expression shifted, like that thought had never occurred to her. "I've been looking at it as failure," she admitted, "as proof that I misjudged everything." "Maybe it's proof that you didn't settle," I suggested. "You walked away when you realized the other person didn't care as much as you did. That's not failure, that's self-respect with paperwork." She let out a breathy laugh. "Self-respect with paperwork," she repeated. "I might steal that." "You're the boss," I said. "You can." She tilted her head slightly. "Thank you," she said. "For seeing it that way, for seeing me that way." I shrugged, a little embarrassed. "It's just what I see," I said. She watched me for a long, quiet moment, the kind of look that feels like being read like a page. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" she asked. My heart sped up a little. "I'm almost afraid to ask," I joked weakly. "I see someone who thinks he's background," she said, "when he's not." The words settled over me like a blanket, warm, unexpected, impossible to ignore. "You think you just support," she went on, "that you're the guy who fixes printers and spills coffee and says, 'It's okay, I don't mind.' But you're not just that. You're the person the room leans on without even realizing it." I looked down at my hands. I don't know how to be anything else, I said. Maybe you don't have to change who you are, she replied softly. Maybe you just need to realize how much that already matters. We fell into silence again, but it felt different now, layered with shared things we hadn't said before tonight. We finished the last box an hour later. The keep pile was much smaller than the let go pile. That looks lighter, I said. So do I, she replied, giving me a tired but genuine smile. I stood stretching my legs. I should probably head home, I said, before the buses start pretending they don't exist. She got up too, walking me to the door. Thank you, she said again, for helping, for tonight. Any time, I said. Seriously. She hesitated, her hand resting on the doorknob. Daniel, she said. Yeah? Her voice softened. I'm glad it was you I asked to stay that night, she said. I don't know how I would have handled it alone. I swallowed, my chest tightening around something I was afraid to name. I'm glad it was me too, I said quietly. We stood there for a second that felt longer than it was. She didn't step closer. Neither did I. But something in the air had shifted. Not dramatic, not rushed, just real. Good night, she whispered. Good night, Amelia. As I walked down the hallway toward the elevator, I realized that whatever this was between us, friendship, connection, something half-formed, it had already changed my life. And maybe, just maybe, it was changing hers too. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of shared lunches, quiet conversations, small jokes, and the kind of lingering glances that you pretend not to notice, even though they stay with you long after you look away. Nothing happened between us. Nothing crossed a line. But the space between nothing and something grew smaller every day, and other people noticed. You could feel it in the air. Whispers didn't sound like whispers anymore. They sounded like suspicion stretched thin between cubicles. There were half smiles that didn't reach the eyes, raised brows that lingered too long, and coworkers who suddenly spoke louder when we walked past, as if volume could distract from curiosity. I told myself I could handle it. I'd been invisible most of my life. Being seen, even through rumor, was new territory. But Amelia, she'd always been visible. Now the spotlight felt harsher. One Tuesday morning, I found her in the break room, fingers wrapped around a mug of mint tea, staring out the window. She didn't turn when I entered. She must have recognized my footsteps. Morning, I said gently. Is it? She replied. I leaned against the counter, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence, but not enough to touch. She didn't meet my eyes. What happened? I asked. She exhaled slowly, shaking her head once. My ex showed up at the office this morning, she said, voice flat but controlled. Reception called me before he could make it past the front desk. My stomach tightened. What did he want? She finally looked at me. Me back, she said. Then after a beat, or at least, the version of me he thinks he deserves. I didn't trust myself to respond right away. I could feel anger rising, not jealousy, just anger that someone who'd treated her like an accessory suddenly wanted ownership again. What did you tell him? I asked. That I didn't need him, she said, and that I wasn't alone. The last words hung in the air like something flammable. I swallowed. My voice felt smaller than usual. Did you mean me? She looked at me without blinking. Yes, she said. I did. Before I could say anything, before I could process what that meant, someone cleared their throat behind us. Jordan, senior partner, master of timed entrances. Amelia, he said briskly, as if he hadn't walked in on a moment he didn't understand. Meeting in 10, bring the Hartley numbers. He turned to me with a polite smile that didn't hide his question. Daniel, I nodded back. Morning. As soon as he left, Amelia rubbed her temples. He thinks we're... She trailed off. Do you care what he thinks? I asked softly. Her eyes flicked toward mine, pained and honest. I don't know, she admitted. I'm not used to being talked about, judged for things that aren't anyone's business, and the timing, with everything else. You don't have to justify anything, I said. Not to me, not to them. She looked down at her mug. Sometimes I forget what I'm allowed to need, she whispered. I wanted to reach out, just touch her arm, her hand, anything. But I didn't. Not here. Not with walls that listened. Before she left, she gave me a soft look over her shoulder. Thank you, Daniel, she said, for staying grounded when I can't. And then she was gone, swallowed by the hallway of expectations that never seemed to loosen their grip. That afternoon, rumors bloomed like weeds. Someone must have seen her ex at the front desk. Someone else must have seen her talking to me yesterday in her office with the blinds half closed. By lunchtime, it became common knowledge that they're seeing each other. By 3 p.m., someone whispered, she left her fiancé for him. By 4:30 p.m., a voice near the printer laughed, they're just waiting for HR to catch up. I wasn't supposed to hear that last one, but I did. It stung more than I expected, not because it was cruel, but because it wasn't true, yet it didn't feel entirely wrong either. After work, Amelia found me collecting my things. Walk with me, she asked quietly. We stepped outside into the cool air. Cars passed, people moved around us, but it felt like we were in a bubble, not isolated, just slowed down. Rumors? She asked without looking at me. Yeah, I said. Louder today. She nodded. I figured. We walked a few paces in silence. Does it bother you? She asked. I took a breath. It bothers me when it hurts you, I said honestly. I can take it, but I don't like when people think they get to rewrite your story. She stopped walking. We stood under a street lamp, the glow soft on her hair. My ex said something before he left, she said quietly. He said I never really loved him. I just loved the idea of not being alone. She met my gaze, really met it. Eyes searching, vulnerable and sharp all at once. But last night, she whispered, when I saw you across the office, I realized he was wrong. I wasn't afraid of being alone. She paused. I was afraid of being with the wrong person. My heart beat so hard I felt it in my throat. I'm not asking anything of you, she added quickly. I'm not rushing. I'm not assuming. I just wanted you to know the difference. I nodded slowly, the only response I trusted myself with. I'm here, I said, whatever that means right now. Her shoulders softened, a release I didn't know she'd been holding. Thank you, she whispered. We started walking again, slower this time. Halfway to the bus stop, she stopped and looked at me, not like a boss, not like someone sorting through heartbreak, but like a person discovering something unexpected and precious. Daniel, she said softly, voice trembling just enough to be real. If this ever becomes something deeper, something real, will you tell me before I lose you too? I didn't let the silence swallow the moment. I'll tell you, I said, if, or when, that time comes. Her eyes glimmered, not with tears, but with something closer to hope. Just before we parted ways, I felt something inside me shift. Not a confession, not a declaration, just an understanding. We hadn't crossed a line yet, but the ground beneath us was no longer the same. She hesitated once more, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel, thank you for not treating me like a rumor. I swallowed. Thank you for not treating me like a shadow, I replied. And that's when I knew, whatever we were becoming, it wasn't nothing anymore. Some endings don't come with fireworks. They come with quiet choices that slowly turn into beginnings. 2 more weeks passed. Rumors didn't stop, but they changed flavor. Less sharp, less curious, more resigned, as if people finally understood that nothing dramatic was happening, at least not on the surface. The truth was simpler and more complicated than they imagined. We weren't dating, we weren't pretending, we weren't avoiding each other either. We were navigating, carefully, the space between caring and crossing a line we couldn't return from. And every step felt like walking barefoot along a shoreline neither of us recognized yet. It was a Friday evening, late spring. The office emptied earlier than usual. Deadlines were met, clients were quiet, and the sky outside looked like it couldn't decide between staying blue or giving in to dusk. I'd stayed behind to finish the last revisions on a project due Monday. Amelia's office light was off when I arrived that morning, a rare sign she was taking space for herself. By 7:15 p.m., I was the only one left on the floor. At 7:18, I heard footsteps, slow, unhurried. Amelia appeared in the hallway, hair slightly windblown, wearing a soft gray sweater instead of her usual blazers. She looked lighter. Not carefree, but less burdened, like she'd set down a suitcase she'd carried too long. "I figured I'd find you here," she said. I smiled. "Someone has to keep the building from collapsing." She gestured toward my laptop. "Are you close to finishing?" "Just saved," I said, closing it gently. "Why?" She drew in a breath, calm, steady, then said the words that shifted everything again. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my bag and followed her into the elevator. We drove in her car, silent but not distant, with the radio playing something soft, the windows half open to let the spring air in. After 20 minutes, we stopped in a part of the city I barely recognized. Older buildings, narrow streets lit by string lights, sidewalks lined with small cafes that looked like they belonged in a different country. She parked outside a modest brick building with a steel door and a small sign above it. "Hartenkobia Rooftop Garden Initiative." I raised an eyebrow. "You own a garden?" She smiled faintly. "My grandfather did. I've been restoring it." She unlocked the door and led me up a narrow staircase, my hand trailing along the cool railing. When we reached the top, she pushed open another door and suddenly, the city opened around us. Not loud or chaotic, but alive. The rooftop wasn't large, but every bit of space held something green. Planter boxes with herbs, small fruit trees, beds of flowers that hadn't yet bloomed, climbing vines reaching toward trellises. String lights hung overhead like stars caught in warm glass, and between all of it, a small wooden bench, worn smooth with time. I stood still for a moment, taking it in. "It's beautiful," I murmured. "It was my refuge growing up," she said softly. "A place where I could breathe. After he passed, I let it fall apart. I didn't have the heart to care for something that reminded me of him." She paused, brushing her fingers across a lavender plant. "But when everything with my engagement happened, I wanted somewhere that wasn't tied to that life, somewhere that was mine again." "And you rebuilt it," I said. "With help," she replied. We walked between the planters, not speaking for a while. The air smelled faintly of soil and mint, that quiet scent that feels like childhood summers and new beginnings tangled together. Finally, we reached the bench. She sat. I sat beside her, not too close, not too far. Down below, the city hummed, cars like fireflies, voices like distant waves, life moving whether we joined it or not. Amelia rested her hands in her lap. "Can I ask you something, Daniel?" she said quietly. "Of course." Her voice was steady, but her eyes held something raw. "When you look at me now, do you see someone just trying not to fall, apart?" She swallowed. "Or do you see someone who's finally, maybe, starting to stand again?" I took my time, not to hesitate, but to answer honestly. "I see someone who walked away from the wrong future before it swallowed her," I said. "And I see someone who's learning she doesn't have to carry everything alone." Her breath caught, just enough that I noticed. "And you?" she asked, voice softer. "What do you see when you look at yourself now?" I stared at the horizon, where the sun dipped, turning the sky gold before giving into dusk. "I see someone who stopped hiding at the edges," I said. someone who stopped being afraid of being seen. I paused, feeling my throat tighten. And maybe someone who's finally allowed himself to want something. She looked at me, really looked, her gaze steady and unflinching. "What is it you want, Daniel?" she asked. The question didn't feel like a trap. It felt like an invitation. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because speaking it out loud would make it real. So instead, I spoke the truth she was really asking. "I don't want to lose what we have," I said quietly, "even if it never becomes anything more." Her lips parted slightly, and for a heartbeat, the entire rooftop felt suspended, like the world hit pause just for us. Then she whispered, "Daniel, I don't want to lose you either." A breeze lifted her hair, brushing it against her cheek. Her hand rested near mine, not touching, but I could feel the warmth radiating between us, like a connection waiting for permission. She didn't ask the question out loud, but I heard it anyway. Are we allowed to want more than this? I didn't move closer, didn't reach for her, not out of fear, but respect. "Amelia," I said softly, "whatever happens next, let it be slow. Let it be honest." She nodded, eyes shining, breath steady. "I don't want anything rushed," she whispered. "I just want to know it's possible." "It is," I said, "but only if we both choose it." Her fingers curled slightly, almost touching mine, but stopping just short. "Not tonight," she said, voice trembling with restraint. "Tonight I just needed someone beside me while I remembered who I am." "I'm here," I replied, "and I'm not going anywhere." We sat in silence after that, watching the last ember of gold fade from the sky, string lights reflecting in her eyes like constellations learning how to shine again. Neither of us reached for the other. Neither of us filled the silence with promises. But as the night deepened, I understood something clearly. Some beginnings are quiet, not in what is said, but in what is finally allowed to be felt. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now.